What if the face in the mirror never changed? What if the years passed, the regrets piled up, even the sins you committed, and yet your face stayed as flawless as it was in youth? What if all the aging, all the corruption of your choices appeared somewhere else, on a canvas hidden in the attic? This was the fantasy or the nightmare at the heart of Oscar Wilde's The Picture of Dorian Gray, first published in 1890. It is more than a gothic story of horror. It is Wilde's meditation on beauty, conscience, and the tension between the outer mask and the inner soul. Dorian Gray begins as a young man of extraordinary beauty. The painter Basil Hallward creates a portrait of him, so vivid, so alive, that even Dorian feels unsettled by it. In that quiet studio, the tragedy is already set in motion. Dorian looks at the portrait and makes a reckless wish that he might stay forever young and that the painting would bear the marks of age and suffering instead of his own body. The wish comes true. As Dorian moves through the glittering salons of London, his face remains as radiant as it was in youth. But the painting, locked away in a dim upper room, begins to change. Every cruel word, every betrayal, every selfish act leaves a shadow, a line, a stain upon the painted image. What Wilde created here is a visible conscience, a mirror for the soul. The body remains untouched, but the inner being is transformed. In most traditions, it is the body that changes while the inner self endures. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, "Just as a person discards worn-out clothes and puts on new ones, so the soul discards worn-out bodies and enters new ones." From birth to youth to old age, the body alters constantly, but the self, the witness, remains. Dorian Gray reverses this order. The flesh is preserved. The inner self is the one that ages and decays. This inversion makes the story so unsettling. It asks, what do we really fear? The wrinkles and the grey hair, or the slow corruption of character? Wilde suggests that the deeper horror is moral, not physical. No discussion of the novel is complete without Lord Henry Wotton. When we first meet him in Basil's studio, he is witty, elegant, a man whose words sparkle like glass. He tells Dorian that youth and beauty are the only things worth having, that one must give in to every impulse, live for sensation, and never resist temptation. Henry never lifts a weapon against Dorian. He never commands him to commit a crime. He is, instead, a voice, a philosophy dressed in epigrams. He fascinates Dorian, who is still young, still uncertain of himself, and plants in him the seed of a dangerous idea, that the outer mask matters more than the inner being. Many readers call Henry the villain of the story, but Wilde was too subtle for such a simple answer. Henry is a tempter, yes, but also a tester. He brings to the surface what was already latent in Dorian: vanity, fear of loss, hunger for pleasure. The tragedy lies in Dorian's own choice to follow that voice. As the years pass, Dorian's outward appearance remains unchanged. Society admires his youthful charm, never suspecting the hidden truth. But in the locked room, the portrait grows monstrous, a twisted echo of his actions. The painting becomes a reminder that actions have consequences, even if those consequences are invisible. It is as if every deed leaves an imprint, not on the skin, but on the spirit. This is not far from the idea of karma, or karma, the moral law that every choice leaves a trace, shaping the future course of the self. Dorian, however, mistakes the absence of visible change for immunity and so sinks deeper into cruelty and excess. In the 1976 television adaptation, we see a haunting portrayal of that corruption breaking into the outer world. When Basil confronts Dorian in the locked attic, pleading with him to repent, the moment turns from accusation to something that almost looks like an embrace. Dorian steps forward as if to hold his old friend. For a heartbeat, it feels intimate, almost tender, and then the knife strikes. That staging underlines Wilde's idea that the corruption is not merely cold brutality. It grows out of closeness betrayed, of intimacy soured by shame and fear. The murder is not just an act of violence, it is the final severing of the bond between the artist who saw the soul and the young man who fled from it. Wilde's novel tells us that the greatest danger is not the aging of the body, but the numbness of the conscience. The real horror is a self that can no longer feel remorse. That near embrace in the 1976 version lingers in the mind because it hints at what Basil represented: affection, conscience, and the original recognition of Dorian's beauty as something worth preserving. To destroy Basil is to destroy that last witness to the soul's light. The closeness of that fatal moment makes the tragedy more human. It is not a remote villain killing a stranger, but a man silencing the one person who loved him enough to tell the truth. When Dorian finally tries to repent, he does it partly out of vanity, hoping that one good action might cleanse the portrait. But the soul cannot be purified by a single gesture if the motive is still self-regard. The portrait grows yet more hideous. In the end, Dorian destroys the painting with a knife, and in that act destroys himself. The mask collapses, the body takes on the true age and corruption that had been hidden away. Here lies Wilde's quiet insight about influence. Words can seduce, but they cannot compel. A voice can tempt, but it is the soul that chooses. Lord Henry's brilliant cynicism plays the role of the serpent in the garden, but Dorian's fall is his own. This is why, in the final chapters, Henry remains untouched, still amusing and light-hearted, while Dorian carries the burden of his deeds. The story suggests that we cannot blame others for the use we make of their words. A tester only reveals the strength or weakness that was already within. The picture of Dorian Gray is often read as a fable about vanity, but at its heart, it is a meditation on the soul. It warns us that what truly shapes our destiny is not the surface we present to the world, but the silent record we write in the inner self. In an age obsessed with images, with photos, profiles, curated appearances, Wilde's century-old novel still speaks. We may polish the mask, but the unseen portrait goes on recording every choice. And the figure of Lord Henry reminds us that temptation often comes as a charm, as wit, as a philosophy that sounds liberating. It cannot harm us unless we choose to follow it. Dorian Gray's tragedy is that he worshipped the body and neglected the soul. In the end, he learned, too late, that the soul cannot be bargained away without consequence. What does your own unseen portrait look like today?